or a modern believer would have added that, and I'm in favor of the modern believer. That would, in any case, as I illustrated, if you read my James book over and over again, James was buried in the ground in the normal way, according to all early church testimony, where he fell beneath the so-called pinnacle of the temple, and his marker was there to the 5th century. So there was not even an ossuary concerning James's body in existence. According to all pilgrim testimony, and that's in Eusebius, who lived in Palestine, Jerome, who lived in Palestine. I just said in my Los Angeles op-ed piece, if these people had read further in my book, they would have known better, but they only read the beginning, where I said perhaps the best proof of Jesus' existence is the fact of his brother James. And that's how everybody was taking it. Oh, finally we have proof of Jesus' existence. Well, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, but that particular ossuary is a total fortune. And I even know the people who did it, and I know for a fact that the people who did it were very well aware of my James book, because I met one of them through the Michael Bajan, Richard Lee, Dead Sea Scroll Deception. And if you've read Michael Bajan, the one who wrote Holy Blood, Holy Grails, a most recent crummy book, he's a nice fellow, a good friend of mine, but his book is pathetic. He needed money, and he wrote this book called the Jesus something or other. Just recently, it's on sale in Barnes and Noble. I forget what it's called.
Jesus Papers.
Huh?
Jesus Papers.
The Jesus Papers, right? Where I know who the antiquities guy is because he introduced me to him in London. He sells forged antiquities and other things. I've got to be careful what I say. But he doesn't mention his name in the book, but I know who the guy is because I was introduced to him, and he knew all about the James thing, and he was in very close touch with the Israeli guy who did all of this, in whose apartment they found all these dental tools and every other thing for forging things on ossuary. So yeah, you were just being conned. And Herschel Shanks is still trying to con everyone, much to his ill repute, and he's just trying to save himself and his magazine. He edits the Biblical Archaeology Review, and he keeps flogging the fact that it's authentic because he's complete ignoramus, and he's only interested in marketing anyway. And he's aiming at the evangelical fundamentalist crowd to sell his magazine, which is fine, but he doesn't have to participate in con jobs, and he's a totally disreputable person. He wrote me the other day asking me, Professor Eisenman, after I gave him a lot of stuff for the Dead Sea Scrolls struggle thing, he said, we're having a coming issue where people are going to tell their personal stories about the Dead Sea Scrolls and how it's meant to them. I think this is a good time for you to reveal who you got your pictures from, don't you? If you'd be willing to reveal who you got your pictures from when you publish the Dead Sea Scrolls, I'd be willing to include you in this magazine. I said, I wrote back, that's very kind of you, Mr. Shanks, Herschel. It's rather insulting, your letter. You mean you wouldn't include me in your magazine anyway? Is that what you're saying? Is this a condition of including me in your magazine? I'm not sure whether that would be the proper format to make such a revelation, but I'll think about it. I didn't want to get him. I didn't want to get him all worked up, so he had some other axes to grind against me. I said I'll think about it, but I don't think you would address people like Frank Moore Cross or Geza Vermesh or others like that. Give them a condition on whether they could appear in your magazine. And basically, I told him, you know what. It says something like FU, I think it's called. Yeah, that's right. Another pseudo-fake journalist. Sorry to be bitter, but you don't know what it's like fighting and being involved with these struggles. That's all I can tell you. So, having said all that, and since you asked me about the James ossuary, I hope that's good enough for you. That really annoys me. Someone wrote me and said, Professor Eisenman, someone who was actually giving us money for our archaeological expeditions, he said, Herschel Shanks is a good friend of mine. Why don't you stay out of this one? You don't need to be involved in this ossuary one. It'll only redound to your negative reputation if you say something negative here. Just leave this one alone, and well, the journalists were calling me. And, you'll sell more books if you just accept the ossuary as authentic. I said, well, I'm not interested in selling books. I'm really not. That's not even the question, frankly. You know, and I'm not trying to jump into this thing. It's just that it's obvious to me that it's a fraud. And I actually got more honor from saying it was a fraud the first day than I got in the whole Dead Sea Scrolls dispute, because a lot of academics were amazed that someone could say the first day without even doing scientific tests that it was a fraud. But you see, that's the whole thing on judging on internal evidence. They never do that. They want measurements, pseudoscientific measurements. They want to measure patina, you know, microbes on it, mud, handwriting, you know, they got all kinds of carbon testing, so on, which are useful tools, but they don't have the precision necessary to deal with a time span of 100, 200 years is what we're dealing with in this period, although many of them pretend that they do. And that is a cop-out for not being able to say something about the text itself. I always say that where the external evidence, and that's in my new book, as you may have seen, is at odds with the internal evidence, such as it is, that is the external evidence, then the internal evidence must take priority over any external evidence to the contrary. Because the internal evidence, if we have someone in the Habakkuk commentary talking about they sacrifice to their standards and worship their weapons of war, and someone is putting that in the 2nd century BC because of handwriting analysis, or pseudo-carbon testing perhaps, that they tried to put that in the 1st century BC, on pseudo-carbon testing, which again I was involved in calling for originally. All these things, you know, you get shafted in these processes always, because other people take them over with other agendas. This all started by way of talking about the herons, as I recall, and now the public television is taking it over with their particular newsworthy agenda or whatever, balancing the white droppings of the herons in the public area vicinities with the needs of nesting. And to my mind, there is no balance between those things. You go to the sea, you expect white droppings. You have a puppy, you pick up its crap. You know, that's the way. That is what nature is. You don't move a tree because you don't like its white droppings. You know, this isn't even an argument, but that's what this particular piece is supposed to be about. You know. But anyway, don't get me worked up on these silly things. I have enough problems in my life. But internal data, and here's a good internal data really, an attack on the family.